So here we are, about addendum number 3 probably. Oh, I actually got her running, and I got the front end put together. Try not to say too many times. I hear that's because you don't have much to say. I got a lot to say, I'm just trying to gather it in the proper order. So the 87 got the front put together, got my bumper and the nose put on. I just got to put the bra on now. Show you a little bit about the connectors and everything that we were talking about before. C1 turned out to be a big key issue with getting her started. I had attempted to wire the battery to BAT and MREL like we talked about for the main relay and battery, but it turns out this JZ computer just wasn't having it. So what I had to do, I had to come up with my own relay scheme, and I'll show you what I was doing here. So I'm still kind of in the process of lubing this up to make it look pretty, but that's the anti-lock computer there. This is the cluster wiring that we'll get to in another video. This right here was the fuel cut relay ground that I actually got to kick on, but it took more than just doing the computer like we thought. If we look in the manual under chapter 3 for the main relay and the wiring, it was the battery and MREL I thought would be the same for the computer, but it actually turned out being different. When I turned on the computer and gave it power, I was expecting to see volts coming out here to pick up this relay, but it didn't. It didn't pick up this relay, which would turn on the circuit open relay and then turn on the fuel pump. So what I wound up having to do, I got a different relay, and so this brown wire is the actual always-on power of the EFI relay. So I've got it on another relay that's on normally open. So here we have ground, which is ground in the computer, and going to a really good battery ground. But the positive side, I got that on the switched, which is a start and run, on the big C1 plug up here. I got that on start and run. So now whenever it goes to run and start, the relay picks up. It gives us power to the EFI relay, which then gives us power to the circuit open relay. And then the green wire on big plug C1 needs to be grounded. That turns her on. So that's got it running for now. But what I'm planning on doing is getting another relay that switches ground when I have run going. So that way it runs for a little while to build up fuel pressure, but it needs to see oil pressure from the oil pressure sender. I thought about that for a while too. Got that set up over here. I got my dash ready to go, and I'm even seeing oil pressure. But I'm thinking about now, the oil sender has got one wire coming off of it, and then it's just grounded to the block. So now we've got a signal and ground. My fear is that if I put a relay across that, and the relay, say, has about 1200 ohms on its coil, Ohm's law dictates that we're going to have a different resistance that we see on the oil pressure sensor, or gauge rather, and it's going to be lying to us, telling us it has a different pressure than it really does. So I think what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to pull off of the JZ's computer sensor, which is right there down there by the oil filter, because I'm not sure what this computer's reading. But at the same time, I want to have fuel pressure when I have oil pressure. And the only other time is when I press the key to run. I want to have about 10 seconds for the fuel pump to build up oil pressure before I start the car. Other than that, I don't want to have fuel pressure if the oil sensor is not picking up oil pressure. Whether that means the engine stalled or if I'm just not getting oil pressure. I don't want to push this engine to the point that it's going to, screw up because I don't have the oil pressure I need. Now, yesterday, I put an inside fuel pressure regulator. I also put an air-fuel ratio meter from AEM. I was noticing that when I gave it the slightest tap of the throttle, I was getting about 12 to 1. But when I would let off of it, I would get about 17. It was almost off the charts. Because I think that air-fuel ratio sensor only sees 17. Above that is just too much for that sensor. So my first thought was, well, I need bigger injectors because at idle, I'm not even getting 14.5 because of this whole deleted thing. It started making me wonder. But what I wound up having to do, the actual throttle position sensor here has got slots on it. And where I had it set was in the middle there. So I have it fully advanced now. And I'm getting 14.7 now. It's not off the charts anymore. It's just about 16 for just a second. Then it goes right back down to 14.7. The other thing too was the adjustable fuel pressure regulator that I put on here. I had it at about 40. I've had to crank it up to about 43 to 45 while it's idling. Of course, when nothing's on, the fuel pressure is going to be a little bit different than when it's running because obviously you're using a little bit of that pressure. So I had to bump it up a little bit to get my ratio numbers looking really good. Now that I've got it going, put the transmission together, I put the stick on so that I was able to actually move it. You can see now I've got the stick shift on and the brake. When I started going down the road, I realized now my brakes have failed. So I've got to do something about that. I think my master cylinder may have gone out just sitting there, which is crazy, I'm not going to say fuck my life. I'll say fuck my tits. Don't say fuck your life because, your life's valuable. Say fuck your tits, especially if you're a dude, because mammaries on a dude is like nuts on a cow. They just don't make sense. I don't know why they're there, but, it is what it is. So that's an update. The other update, too, is I've loomed all of this up to make it kind of neat. See there, I went along the back, and it's jumping in there. Another thing I'd like to say, too, is stainless steel zip ties are the way to go because the engine heat is going to melt those nylon guys, and yeah, you don't want that. So I put stainless steel zip ties on it. That's about most of what I wanted to share on this video, other than the whole relay part, because it doesn't seem like the JZ computer wants to energize the main relay output. I think they all need some kind of positive output because I couldn't really get it to run or start without wiring all of those up. And I'll show you again on the computer the things that are really important on the computer itself. On F60 here, you have maybe about 5 or 6 wires here. See how the rest of them are just chopped off? This is everything I didn't need. This is all stuff that's going from the computer to the engine, so you need all of that. But on these last 2 plugs, what's really important is this one on F59, which is telling the engine to start, and you're going to put that on start, just start only. The rest of these are going to be start and run, with the exception of 2 of them which have constant power, and I believe that's the one for your drive-by-wire and just for the computer to be on all the time. I believe to make corrections for when you're driving in the ambient conditions. The rest of them need to be on start and run, and that's going to keep them going. But the other important things for the body are going to be your fuel injectors, your starter, your igniter, and all of that stuff. And that's going to go to this fat B1 guy right here. And like I said, I figured out how to bypass fuel cut for now. I've got to do something intelligent other than just having this grounded, because all this is doing is turning the fuel pump on at this point. I don't really want it to be like that, because there may be a point where I want it to shut off, and there's nothing you can do about that if the key switch is still in run, unless you have some kind of failsafe in place, like you know, having a relay that's breaking this connection, you know, when oil pressure drops, or something other than that, that's demonstrating to this relay that the engine's not running. So you don't want fuel pressure when the engine's not running. So that is, I guess I would call this addendum 3. So cheers. I hope this is helping anybody.